Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the third and final webcast of our Summer of Strength series titled How to Up-Level Yourself. In our last webcast, we learned about how we can share our strengths in a way that's productive for ourselves and for others. And today, we will explore how we can maximize our potential and our impact by leveraging our unique strengths and standout roles. My name is Jamie Chai, and I'm excited to be back again as your moderator. Before we begin, I'd like to review a few logistical items. First, a recording of today's session and the slides will be distributed in the next week or so be on the lookout for an email coming your way. Second, we will have a Q&A session after Marcus's presentation today. So locate the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. And if you have questions at any point during this webcast, submit your questions there. And lastly, we invite you to use the chat functionality within this platform to connect with other webcast participants. Take a moment right now to open up the chat window from the bottom of your screen and type in the location of where you're calling in from. I already see a lot of locations coming in, so thanks for sharing. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. And I am joining today from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hello, Jen from Michigan and Victor from Pittsburgh. Shava from Wyoming, Europe. We have several Minneapolis. Hello, Minneapolis friends. Vancouver, Canada, Casey from Denver. It's so great to see so many of you here with us, and we are excited to learn more today on how we can maximize our potential. So once again, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Marcus Buckingham. Marcus is a global researcher and New York Times best-selling author focused on unlocking strengths, increasing performance, and pioneering the future of how people work. He's the author of two of the best-selling business books of all time, has two of Harvard Business Review's most circulated, industry-changing cover articles, and his strengths assessments have been taken by over 10 million people worldwide. He now leads people and performance research at ADP Research Institute, spearheading groundbreaking global studies on resilience and engagement. So Marcus, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a couple of questions from our last webcast that we did not have a chance to answer.
Hi, Jamie Chai.
Hi, Marcus. Great to see you.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I love what you've done with the place.
Thank
totally
you.
Different from last time. Yeah.
New scenery. Yeah.
Way too much color though for me. Seriously, it's just a little overwhelming. So maybe tone it down next time.
You're balancing my place. So thank you for bringing in the no color for me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right, here we go. Our first question is this. Can you have a difference in styles at work versus in your personal life?
Can you have a difference in style between work and personal life?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, the short answer to that question is yes, of course you can. Having said that, the most important thing to take away from all of this strength stuff, all of this work that we've been doing standout, is that there is an enduring part of you, recurring patterns, not bad patterns. I know sometimes we think of patterns as things we should break. In a lot of therapy, you're told to examine your patterns and then break free of your patterns, because patterns are, in general, in the world of psychology, thought of as bad. But actually, every single one of us has recurring patterns of thought, of feeling, of making sense of the world, of love, of loathe. And those patterns are, the Greeks actually used to call that your character. The Vikings called that your weird. Not W-E-I-R-D, but W-Y-R-D. You have a weird within you, which is like a daimon or a spirit or a unique set of loves and loathes and patterns, and that's within you. And we know that you take that with you through your entire life. So So wherever you are, if you're instinctively an influencer, to take a word from Standout, you take that with you from situation to situation. If you're instinctively a provider and you instinctively pick up on the emotional signals of a particular person and how they're feeling, you take that with you wherever you go. If you're instinctively an advisor and you are sure that you have the best answer to things and that your common sense approach to what's the best thing to do, that just feels so right to you, well, you take that with you in whatever situation you're in. So you don't really become a different person. I know this is going to sound strange maybe to some of you on this call, but you don't become a different person at work versus home. Your style of manifesting that advisor-ness might be different. So you might change the way that you manifest your advisor to your kids or to your lover, your spouse, or your partner. But in terms of your advisor-ness, you don't turn that on and turn that off. Or rather, it's a very rare person who's got that kind of weird psychological self-discipline. They can just shut off their recurring patterns when they go to work and then turn them on again at home, or vice versa. So in fact, that's actually quite a psychologically damaging thing to do, to try to become somebody else at work, to have to wear a mask at work, to try to become less of you at work, is psychologically destructive to you, actually. Love is one of those things that if you don't let it flow, it burns you from the inside out. There's a lovely phrase around, if you don't let forth what is within you, it will destroy you. If you let forth what is within you, it will create you. So in that sense, your life and your work, and gosh, these days, those things are so kind of molded, aren't they? Those things need to be integrated for you so that you can let your strengths out. Now, how you do it with your partner, if you're an influencer, you might not want to be selling to your partner all the time. If you're at work, you might want to use that influencer to get something done that you want to get done. So your style may change, but you actually don't, which is not a distinction without a difference. It's an important distinction. Wherever you go, there you are. And part of the whole purpose of doing the Standout thing is that you get comfortable with who you are. Mm-hmm. You love who you are. So short answer, sorry, slightly longer answer than a short answer, but the longer answer is you take yourself with you wherever you go and you figure out the most effective style to be able to create in the people around you the reactions that you want. Mm-hmm. But you're not a different person.
Mm-hmm. I like that line you shared about love. If you don't let that flow, it will burn you. And so how do we bring our uniqueness everywhere we go? And so fully, even at work and in our personal lives. So yeah, thank you, Marcus. All right, so our next question is, do strengths and weaknesses change over time?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, that's a really interesting one. In fact, if it's okay with you on that one, Jamie Chai, I'll pivot off that to get us into the subject that we're talking about this morning or this afternoon, wherever you happen to be. I saw there's some folks in Brazil, some folks in Moscow, Austria, so wherever you happen to be. Yeah, let's use that to pivot into what we're going to talk about here, because what you're really asking there about is change, isn't it? You're asking about change. I mean, not to put you on the spot, but have you, over the course of your life, have you felt, and I don't know what you're going to say to this, but have you felt that your strengths and weaknesses have changed over time? How does that resonate with you as you think about that question?
Yeah, I think for me, it actually, I'm not sure if it's changed, but what has happened for me is as I advance in my strengths journey, I learn more and more about my strengths over time, and it takes a long time. So even starting working at TNBC or the Marcus Buckingham company, I've focused on my strengths, and being able to articulate my loves and my loathes has been super helpful for me. What do I love doing, and constantly reflecting on that to be able to say, here's where I'm at my best. Here's where my sweet spot is. And so over time, I've been able to learn more of that. I don't think it's changed necessarily, but I didn't always know that these were my strengths until I'm still learning. It's a continuous journey, right? So I'm still learning.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of the important things about doing something like this is that you take a step back from yourself. All of us on this call right now, you're so close to yourself, you don't really see yourself anymore. We look at you and we go, gosh, it's so amazing that Jamie Chai can do this on this call, and she can seem so like in control and authentic and amazing. And there's I don't know, 400 people on the call or whatever who couldn't do that. And yet you, Jamie, you're like, no, I can do this. Like I'm inside myself, so it doesn't feel like this is that hard. It sort of feels like it's breathing. Or we look at somebody who finds an error in 1,000 lines of computer code and we go, how'd you do that? And the person goes, that wasn't even hard. Or someone who takes a patient in a hospital and finds the right tone and the right body language and the right eye contact to calm that patient down. And we look at that person and go, that was amazing how you did that. And the person's like, no, how else was I supposed to do it? It's one of those funny things about life, is that we're so close to our own strengths that we don't see them as strengths at all. We just think that's just living. So part of this journey of change is to figure out how you get a little bit of distance from yourself, not to be braggadocio. Like we talked about last time, it's like, how do you talk about your strengths without sounding like a braggart? The point here isn't to be a braggart. The point is to be able to take yourself seriously. The point is to be able to step back and see what it is that you bring to the world and then figure out a way to bring it in more effective or amplified ways, which is, of course, a bit of what the conversation is today. So actually, in terms of that, this whole notion, and I guess I'll pivot off that and we'll sort of dive into some of the stuff I wanted to share. It is one of the age-old questions, isn't it? How much of something can you change? It's one of the things that the ancient philosophers all tried to grapple with. Before we knew about genes, people used to think, well, maybe we could, if a caterpillar can turn into a chrysalis and a chrysalis can turn into a butterfly, then why can't we turn a baby horse, a foal, into a bull? If we treat it like a bull and feed it like a bull, put it with other baby bulls, maybe we can turn it into a bull. Now, of course, we know that that's sort of crazy, but you can see why the ancients were really interested by change. What, as something grows, stays the same about it, and what changes? Because clearly some things do change. As we get older, we change in terms of how we look and how we think about ourselves, or as Jamie said, our amount of self-awareness, our amount of defensiveness about ourselves, our amount of forgiveness of ourselves. I mean, those things change. So what changes and what stays the same is like, it's something that's been fascinating for all of us over the course of our lives. As we think about how to up-level yourself, well, on one level, that's, no pun intended, that's about change, isn't it? How do you really grow and step into yourself? I was talking to the son of a friend of mine the other day, and he asked me this question: how much of me can I change? And he didn't ask it theoretically. So 18 or 19, and we were talking actually about college applications. And this is a kid who's about 6'2" or 6'3". He's got like flowing blonde curls. Looks like he spent 45 minutes sort of getting that all ready, but actually just wakes up and he looks like that. He's a surfer. When I was growing up at 18, 19 in London and around London, he's who I wanted to be. If I could like have waved a magic wand and gone, I want to be a surfer in Southern California, 6'3". I want to just look like I was born with a board on my feet. B-O-A-R-D, not bored. But anyway, he looks at me and goes, I am crippled with anxiety. I can't, in these interviews for college, I don't know what to say. I don't know what questions to ask. I feel the same way in any social situation at home or at school. I walk into a room and I just know everyone is looking at me and expecting me to say something really stupid, and I probably do. And then when I'm sitting in class, I don't know not only what the answer is, I don't even know what the right questions are, and I think my questions are going to be stupid. I'm crippled by anxiety. And I look at him and I'm thinking to myself, you have so many advantages. Do you realize how lucky you are? Not least you're growing up in a first world country, and you're a white male in a society that tends to put excess value on those things. You have sort of advantage, like you're lucky. But of course, that's just me looking from the outside in. All of us are going through our own stuff, aren't we? You are now. You're going through things. I don't know what you're going through, but you're going through things right now that no one knows about you. And this kid, 19, his inside out look in the world is like, I am just stymied with my own anxiety. And apparently what we're supposed to say to him, my anxious friend, is we're supposed to say, well, look, you should have a growth mindset. Growth mindset, as you know, comes out of, well, as you may know, comes out of Carol Dweck's work from Stanford. And it's good stuff. Basically, what Professor Dweck's work was focused on was saying, look, you're not the opposite of a growth mindset. You shouldn't have a fixed mindset. You should have a growth mindset, which means on some level, look, you can get it. Whatever the it is, you can get it if you just work at it. So to my anxious friend, a growth mindset would be, hey, you can be less anxious. You can work at being less anxious. Let me teach you some tips on how to be less anxious. Let me perhaps go back through into your childhood to find out the traumas that might have caused that anxiety. Let me unpeel the stories that you tell yourself and the evidence that you gather to explain your anxiety to yourself. I could sort of do all of that with him because he should be able to fix it if he just works at it. But of course, well, not of course, for the purposes of our time today, that is not the right thing to do for him. In a sense, there's something really quite challenging about the idea of a growth mindset, because really the choice isn't growth or fixed. No one really believes that no human being is capable of growing. The question isn't, do you grow or not? The question is, where do you grow the most? And how do you grow most effectively? So for my anxious friend, it's like, what can he do without trying to become a different human, or without trying to become someone who's just defining himself by his traumas, or without trying to become somebody who repudiates himself and just gets ticked off with himself for being anxious when he shouldn't be, or listens to lectures from me about how lucky he should think of himself as being. How can he actually do what Jamie Chai was just saying, which is step into the fullness of himself, love himself, and yet still make intelligent change so that he isn't trapped in his own anxiety? Like, that's a really interesting question. You might not be trapped in anxiety, but there are certain things that you might want to do to up-level yourself or to free yourself even from things that pull you down. We actually know from data, we know quite a lot about the answer to that question of where will you change the most? You may know this, but if you don't, brain scientists tell us that you have right around 100 trillion synaptic connections in your brain when you get to be an adult. And yes, you can grow more synaptic connections, but you grow more synapses in the areas where you have the most pre-existing synapses. That's what we know from brain science. You have 100 trillion of them, and then you grow more where you already have more. Why? Because nature does what nature always does. There is infrastructure, if you like, in your brain around your thickest synaptic connections, proteins, blood vessels. There's like infrastructure. So nature does what she always does, is she follows the path of least resistance. So if you're going to grow more synapses, learn more, develop more, amplify yourself more, you're going to do it in the areas where you already have some sort of natural strength, some sort of natural love. Now, of course, in the world of school, we don't say that, do we? We say that if you've got an A, a C, and an F, you should focus on the F, because the F is where you'll grow the most. You don't need to grow in the A because it's an A. But you got to grow in the F because the F is, and we even call it an area for development. And the same is true at work, isn't it? You go to work and somebody says, well, you're good over here, Jamie Chai, but over here, you're struggling. So focus on here. And we won't call that weaknesses because that's sort of labeling. We'll call that an area for development. And so from a very early age, all the way on through your schooling and your work, you're told that you'll actually grow the most and learn the most in those areas where you have the weakest or thinnest branches of synaptic connections. It's almost like the brain science people aren't talking to the teachers or the managers or the parents. These brain scientist people call growth, your growth, they call it new buds on existing branches. That's the metaphor to keep in mind for you. You grow more new buds on existing branches of synapses. So where your strengths exist, where your loves exist, where you found some moments or situations or contexts where, to Jamie Chai's phrase, you are at your best, that's where you'll grow the most. Not that you could ignore this stuff over here, those areas where you are barren, if you like, or thin little synapses. You can't ignore this, but don't call that, that's not an area of opportunity for you. That's actually something you're going to have to compensate for and manage around. So in terms of my anxious friend, what the brain scientists would tell him is, hey, yeah, you're stymied by anxiety. All right. Well, let's not keep going down that path and examine where that came from, what that is, the 17 situations in which that occurs for you. Let's not do that, because change will follow the focus of your attention. Change will follow the focus of your attention. If we keep focusing on the traumas that perhaps created that anxiety, we will traumatize you. We will turn you into a collection of traumas. And then weirdly, you move more toward that until you start to define yourself by those things that happen to you. Let's not do that. Let's instead, with my anxious friend, let's start and go, okay, anxiety is stopping you from doing something. All right. Where are your thickets of synaptic connections? Namely, where do you think you're at your best? What was a moment last week where time did fly by? What was a moment last week where you felt that you loved it? What was a moment last week when you felt you were most like you? Let's start cataloging. Let's just start cataloging moments and situations and contexts and people where you feel like this, where you feel like you were loving that moment. Let's get you thinking about all of those things, not to make you feel better, but because those moments when you feel like that, those are powerful moments for you. And if you keep moving on through those moments and thinking about what they are, you'll be able to apply them to situations where at the moment you feel super anxious. I'll give you one. I'll just give you one example of that. Not from him, because I don't really feel like it's fair to share some of those details. So I'll just share this. I'll just share this with you. And I was talking to Meredith on our team about this because we're doing the Summer of Strength series. It's felt a bit like a podcast. And so was talking to Harvard Business Review, and they were saying, well, would you like to do a podcast to extend some of this stuff about you at your best? How does some of the stuff we're talking about here help you get back to the very heart of you? We have 16% of people that are fully engaged at work. 16. What can you share, they said, about how people can get back to the very heart of them so that we can get more than 16% of people going to work and feeling like their very best? We've got, as you know, we've got kids on Adderall, we've got kids on Xanax to take them off the Adderall. We've got opioid addiction through that. Like, we've got a lot of alienated people in the world, and it's not just a function of the pandemic, is it? It's a function of someone else. So anyway, HBR came and said, would you consider a podcast? And so we're playing around with it. If any of you think, and I know maybe you listen to podcasts all the time, I'm not sure entirely how I feel about it, but if you think that continuing this in podcast form, and maybe we'll do video too, if you think that's useful, just put it in chat. Just let us know in chat if you think that would be interesting, and I'll sort of double down on it. But if it's okay with you, I'll take your reaction as a guide. I happen to think helping you find your way back to the very heart of you is a really, really important thing to do. Gosh, you got so many kids going off to college right now, and they just don't know who they are or how to learn and how to be. And then we end up hiring them at 23 and 24. And it's like, gosh, there's a lot we could do to help people really, to Jamie Chai's point, step into the very best of themselves. So if you think a podcast would be interesting or helpful, let us know in chat. Anyway, I was sharing this with Meredith as we were sort of prepping for figuring out what podcast would feel like and how personal it would be, and things like that. And so I thought I'd share this with you today because we were talking about it the other day. I wasn't anxious growing up, but I grew up with a crippling stammer, as we called it in England. So for the first 12 years of my life, I couldn't speak, which I know sort of feels a bit weird because I'm speaking now. So in the context of our time together, you're probably going, well, you changed. I mean, you changed. You had a stammer when you're young, and now you can speak. Like, what changed about you, Marcus? But I'll tell you, I mean, initially for me, I was like my anxious friend, where every single day when I woke up, I would just wish that I could speak. And I wasn't anxious. It wasn't like I was not speaking because I was anxious. I thought, I thought I knew the answers. I thought I was legit. I thought I had validity. I just couldn't speak. I couldn't say my name, Marcus Buckingham. I mean, come on. It's a freakishly long name for a person with a stammer. I remember my very first day of school, 7 and 8 years old, I dropped off by my mom. And in the 12 minutes between going from home to getting to school, when I imagine every other kid was sort of thinking about what soccer team they might get on or name of their teacher or something, I was thinking, how will I introduce myself? How do I say my name? And I got out of the car, and they sent some of the older pupils over to sort of welcome the new kids. And this 10-year-old kid came up to me and he goes, what's your name? And I then spent about 5 minutes trying to get Marcus to come out of my mouth. And then I gave up. And so then he gave up. And we walked into the classroom, and the teacher turned to the older pupil and went, so who's this? And the pupil said, well, he couldn't say. And the teacher says, well, he didn't say? And the pupil goes, no, he couldn't say. So the teacher then turns to me and goes, what's your name? And I try to, I'm like, Marcus is a disaster. M's always were tricky for me. I don't know why. I always just think I wouldn't get married because I couldn't say the word Mary, which sounds sort of stupid now, but at the time, like, it's your everything, right? So I thought, Marcus, I'm going to ditch that. I'm going to try and say Buckingham. And it's, I mean, 5 minutes on Buckingham. And my nickname, which I had all the way through school, was Buckingham, because it got coined that very first day. All these other young people coming to the school were standing around as I tried to say my name. And it was like, you know, it's a disaster, because it's not a disaster, but I can't speak. And you can imagine, I mean, somebody who took a growth mindset just would say, well, look, work at it. Go to a speech pathologist, maybe think about some of the trauma that might have affected you in your life that caused it. Let's get to the root cause, or let's get to the physiological cause. Let's really investigate deeply your stammer. And then maybe we can put some tongue twisters together so that you can say Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers 2,700 times, and then your mouth will, it's like the sort of 10,000 hours version of stammering. You just say it frequently enough, your mouth will, you'll change. Anyway, nothing works. Nothing, I mean, all the way through high school, it went away. I'm sorry, it didn't go. It was just all the way through there, rather. And then I got to, for me, the beginning of high school. Well, in England, we didn't call it high school. So it was like, I was 13 years old. I think it was late June. And I walked by the notice board, and my headmaster, and he had this little scrawly red handwriting, and he'd written 5 boys that were being asked to speak in chapel the next week, and one of them was my name. And I was like, why would you pick me? Like, why would you do that? You know, everyone knows Buckingham can't speak. That's why they skip him in class when they're reading a book aloud. Everyone knows it. Why would you do that? I'm like, that's just deliberately punitive. Anyway, for me, I mean, it was a super stressful time, because I'm thinking, I want to change. I can't change. I'm fighting myself every day. I can't speak. I've got things to say. I can't say them. I'm being teased. Fine, whatever. That's just life. But I'm also just stymied. I'm just stuck. And I was panicked. I mean, I thought my whole life at school would be doubly over, because now, you know, only the people in the classroom with me could hear the stammer really, but now this is the entire school. And school kids have a long memory. And the night before, I'd gone into the chapel, and it was it's beautiful chapel. I mean, candlelight, and it was soothing, the light glinting off the sheen of the pews, the mahogany pews. It was sort of beautiful and calming. But the 5-minute piece had taken 15 minutes for me to get it out. So I knew from the night before it was going to be like, this is going to be terrible. And the next morning I did stupid things that kids do. I was like, I'm going to pedal really hard and get super, super, super tired, and I'll be too tired to stammer. That's what I'll do. So I pedaled really hard. I got there. I walked in like being someone sort of being walked into their own execution. And oh gosh, I'm saying it now, I'm like, my palms are starting to sweat. Anyway, they call me up. I get up, I walk around to the lectern, and I turn and face these 400 people in the chapel. And I see all the eyes, and I've never been in this situation before. And no one's ever put me in this situation before because I've got a stammer and I can't speak. So I've never been in that situation before. But I look out and I can't even tell you exactly how it all works spiritually or physiologically, but it was like there was a warm glow around my head. It was like someone had poured honey from my brain down through my throat, and everything opened up. And it was like the eyes of people upon me somehow was a stimulus that unlocked things, and I could speak. And I did the whole piece in 5 minutes, not a single stammer. And all my classmates were sort of looking at me like they were cheated of good teasing material. But I was as shocked as anyone. It was like, I didn't know what happened, but the stimulus of all those eyes had opened me up for no good reason other than the weird inside me. My uniqueness is something that makes sense of people staring at you in a way that works for me. It opens my mouth. Fear of death is the number one fear. Fear of public speaking is the number two fear. Not for me, apparently. And so for me at that time, I was like, wow, that love of that moment is a signal. It's like a code breaker. And then for that moment on, what I did, and I think it's maybe the only smart thing I probably ever did as a teenager, I went, why don't I just pretend from this point on, when I'm talking to you one-on-one, I'll just pretend I'm talking to 400 people. I can't speak in an empty chapel. I can't speak one-on-one, but I can speak to 400 people in a chapel for no good reason. So why don't I just take that stimulus and apply it, transpose it into any regular conversation that I'm having? I'll trick myself. And I did, and the stammer went away. Maybe it was a month, maybe it was 3 weeks, but it went away. Now, if I'm tired or if I'm stressed, it sort of can still come back. So it's still there lurking, ready to coil its way around my throat a little bit. But my point in bringing all this up, of course, is that by diving into the pathology of a stammer, you just learn a lot about the pathology of a stammer, and you get to define yourself by that pathology. Instead, if you could look at those moments for me of when I was fluent, when are you fluent? When are you fluent? And you take that fluency and then you apply it to the stammer. It's like you're using your strengths to mitigate the weak. You're not turning a weakness into a strength, which is sort of Jamie Chai's question originally. You're not doing that. You're taking the power of a strength, the self-efficacy of that, the fluidity of that, and you're applying it to the things that stop you. So for my anxious friend, the same would be the best prescription for him, for me and him to kind of go through a week and go, when did you vanish into what you were doing and you felt so yourself? When did you feel like you were most at your best? When did you feel people's eyes upon you and you liked it? Was there any moment like that? When was that? Let's think about the details. Strengths lie in the details. Love lies in the details. What are the details of that? Now, of course, ideally, you'd have school that would spend 10 years helping him figure that out and be really interested in what he loved and what he loathed and why and when and how much and who. Probably that should be one of the things you learn as a student. Wouldn't that be so great? No, we don't do that. But for you, if you are my anxious friend, if you have a stutter or the equivalent of that, if you're struggling with something right now, some part of you that you want to change, some part of you that's holding you back, you in a sense do have a choice. You could go down the trauma route and become a deep expert in everything that weakens you. And I'm not suggesting you don't do that at all. But in terms of the balance of it, what the data would suggest and the brain science would suggest is that the more detailed you can be in really understanding where your thick branches of synaptic connections are. When are you fluent? When are you fluid? When does time fly by? When do you vanish into something? When do people turn to you and say, whoa, how'd you do that? When are you singled out for praise? When does somebody have to tap you on the shoulder to stop you from doing something because you're so in the middle of it and you love it so much? When are those things? Because it's not just that those things make you happy to think about. Those things are your code breakers for any other impediment. Mine happened to be a speech impediment, but for any other impediment in your life. You focus on your strengths, you focus on your loves, you're curious about them, not to do this, jolly well done me. No, not for that reason. You do them because they are the places in which you are most powerful, both for contributing them and for mitigating a weakness. whenever you get lost, and so many of us, if you look at the data on people saying they are lost in life or lost at work, or as I said, maybe even self-medicating because they feel lost, we see an epidemic, not just of things like COVID, but we see an epidemic of people that are distanced from themselves. When you feel that way, as some of you might even today, just remember the way to reorient yourself, the way to find yourself again when you feel lost, or when somebody you're in a relationship with is deliberately hiding you, or when some place that you work is hiding you, or some school even is hiding you. The best way to find yourself again is to follow the clues of what you love, where a moment strengthens you, where a moment allows time to fly by for you. Follow those clues and they will reorient you to the power of you. I mean, right now, last thing I'll show this and I'll dive into these strengths roles, but my son, my lovely son, Jack, has been sick for like 3 months and I saw him yesterday and he's sicker than he was. And yeah, so it's like, that's hard to think about and we got to figure out what to do there. But the thing that brings me back to what I'm doing is this with you. I'm strengthened by doing this. And yes, I've got to figure out how to take care of Jack, but this is what I do to give me strength. And it reorients me in a world where there's a lot I can't control. I can control what my contribution might be through my strengths. So that's sort of what we were wanting to share on things like this podcast, because there's so much to unpick there. As I said, if you're interested in that, if you think that'd be useful, let us know and we'll try to figure out with Harvard how to do that. For the moment, for today, I'll just share some of the things you can do for these 9 strengths roles, and then we'll take some questions. I'll go through this fairly expeditiously. I'm going to start right here for us. So all of this is just to get you, by the way, if you want more of this content, it's in your standout report, deeper content. And I know no one really ever helps you kind of turn up the dial on yourself, but in that area of the report, which talks about how to take your performance to the next level, this is where this content comes from. So if you want to help yourself, you want to help someone that you love or someone that you lead, sit with that page for a while. Advisors, if you're an advisor, the thing to do, of course, here is distinctions. I'll just pick a couple of things with each one. Find places where people need your distinctions. You're brilliant at distinctions. So if you can say it's X, it's not Y, you're so good at that. When you step into places where people are like, what's the difference between a strength and a skill, for example? Like, you're good at those sorts of distinctions. When you're in a situation where the route is unclear, you have way more power in that situation than many of us, because you have an instinctive understanding and a belief in your own common sense. Put yourselves in situations where the road is unclear and you've got to get the facts fast. That's where you are at your very best. In terms of connector, find a couple of groups of experts in which you can play the organizing role. You're at your best when you're deliberately surrounded by talented people. Go find some talented people. You are so valued by talented people because you are bringing other people together with them. Where can you find a group of talented people and then be the person that pulls them together in a combinatorial way? Frequency is interesting for you. Are you doing this every day? And by the way, this is true for every single one of your strengths roles. Every single one of these 9. Every day, what are you doing every day to put that strength to work? It seems that an awful lot of success and an awful lot of thriving isn't a function of the intensity of your feelings about something. It's a function of your frequency of using it. Frequency trumps intensity. Frequency trumps intensity. Are you figuring out some way to connect someone or something every day? Little things, but every day. Same with any one of those 9 strengths roles. If you're a connector, can you sign up for something that's just a fun experience that has no one in it that you know and just go alone? Put yourself in situations where you got to turn up that connector up to 11 and pull people together who don't know each other. People will, boy, you'll be so valued because so many people don't do that. You do that. Creators, this is just a discipline for you. You need time to muse. You need time to muse. Discipline yourself to have it religiously. You need time to process. You get disconnected and discombobulated when you don't. Take time. The world moves quickly. No one really knows that you need that time. You need that time. The other thing I would say here is this third one, stick your neck out. Come on. What's your home run concept? Sometimes as creators, I'm like this way. That's probably why I asked you if you wanted a podcast, because I'm like, do I want to do that? Or does anyone want that? You know, so taking my own advice here, it's like, come on, if you really want to share a contribution, where's the biggest exposure and the biggest risk? Go on, put it out there. If you're a creator, sometimes as creators, we live so much inside our own mind, we don't put it out there. All right, come on, take a concept, take something that you've thought through and put it out there so that people can actually bloody well react to it. That's how you'll learn. That's how you'll grow. Equalizer. Yeah, you're always going to be so powerful when you're in a situation which requires principle. What's the principle of the thing? People see you as incredibly powerful when you're asked to call upon the principle, to articulate the principle. What is the principle of the thing? When you do that, the words come easily for you and you seem as though you are completely in control. The mediator role is an interesting one for an equalizer. Mediator. Can you help people to get off the rock of their opinion? Can you find the principled common ground? It's not necessarily a muscle that I mean, sometimes as equalizers, one could get very righteous. So the mediator role is, in a sense, a step above righteousness. It's finding the righteousness of different people with different perspectives. Is there a righteous common ground? Can you find that? That's not easy to find, and sometimes it isn't even real. But can you push yourself to find the mediator role, where you're helping others to find that principle that they do actually share? Influencer. Tie your agenda to a mission. Tie your agenda to a mission. The biggest challenge, I think, for influencers in general is that it can feel, you might not know this, but it can feel as though we are being maneuvered. Influencers bring stuff up and it's all about the consequences. And if we don't do this, this is going to happen. And that's good. That's very cool because you move things forward. And that's a very, very powerful strength. Can you tie what you're doing to a mission, though, so we can see ourselves as part of it? Can you be deliberate in talking about the mission or the purpose of what you're trying to do so that we don't just feel like we're being maneuvered? The other part of that, about that, of course, is can you discipline yourself to find the win-wins? Sometimes you could probably lapse into the win-lose philosophy of a zero-sum game. If I win, then the most powerful influences are always, in a sort of Dale Carnegie way, trying to figure out how to get you exactly what you want and figure out the language to talk about why my win is my win and you're helping me see my win. That's such a beautiful talent. It's such a beautiful strength if you can cultivate it. Help me figure out how to visualize why moving in the direction you want me to move is a win for me. Pioneer. The situation there for you, I think, which is so powerful, is your curiosity. You could be, and maybe you already do this, you could be an amazing mentor for people because you're curious. You're fascinated by what people are interested in. You don't need it to be finished. You don't need it to be done and completed. You're interested in people's new ideas. You're interested in people's experiments. You're interested in the risk inherent in letting someone run a little bit, what a great thing as a mentor to let people figure out how to run and run fast. Providers. The last one says, be an agent of transformation through your actions and your demeanor. You may not know this because you're a provider, so it just feels normal to you, but we are all of us, we're all scared to be left alone. Providers are the ones going, we're here, I'm here. I'll figure out ways to ensure that you're not left behind. I will make sure that you're attended to. I'll make sure that you're listened to. I'll make sure that you're seen. I'll make sure that you're heard. You might not think that that's so special, but your actual behavior around that is transformative. We can get pretty atomized in this world, can't we? Pretty lonely. And the provider is someone who can show others just how valuable it is to make sure that there is no person left behind. And I think as part of that, you're most passionate, you're most persuasive as a provider when you are speaking to the fundamental worth of every single person, including yourself, But if you want to up level yourself, in a sense, put yourself aside for a minute and think about how you would articulate to people that we have a better world, we have a better team, we have better customer relationships when we are genuinely thinking about other people's emotional state, how they are feeling and making sense of things. Your passion around that, and your asking of people to have real world commitments around that, is part of what makes you super powerful for us. Stimulator. This is an obvious one for stimulator, but just do set some boundaries for you. There'll be some emotions you can't turn around. So at some point you might, if you want to up level yourself, you might have to define for yourself which particular audience you're trying to reach here. Going down to the bottom, you know, keep doing, that sounds pretty obvious. Yeah, but are you actually putting yourself out there with a predictable routine where you're trying stuff out there that might get a positive emotional reaction in the form of a story, in the form of something you've written, in the form of a way to run a meeting, in the form of the way that you're writing an email, in the form of a nickname that you might be choosing for your team? And there's a possibility that people will laugh at you. There's a possibility that you won't get the reaction that you want. Okay, keep doing it anyway. Keep putting yourself out there in terms of things that you're trying to do to uplift, to lift up, to bring a little drama, good drama, into people's world. Sometimes you won't get the reaction that you want. That's okay, keep trying. We turn to you for that. Last thing here is teacher. Obviously you're interested in your own learning. And so for you, the middle point here is, are you attending the right sort of cutting edge, I'll say, conferences? And virtually, of course, we mean today attending. Are you learning enough? Are you learning enough? You're a teacher, you like learning. Are you learning enough? What classes are you taking? What books are you reading? Take your teaching seriously by thinking of yourself as a learner. Now you might say everyone should be a learner, and they should, but you particularly, you like to feast on new input. So have you disciplined yourself to do that? No one will do that for you in this day and age. And then in terms of your mentors, if you like, sorry, your mentees, as a teacher, you've probably got some people that you've touched over the years. You might not even know, but some people who felt as though you'd paid attention to where they were at. You listened to what they were looking at versus just coming in and assuming. You saw the world from their perspective. You were interested in their perspective, and they remembered it. Maybe you didn't, but they did. It's going to be super invigorating for you to stay in touch with those people. Are you deliberately staying in touch with the people that you've helped learn and grow? Are you deliberately seeing them as a work in progress and then keeping track of their progress? This day and age, of course, we can stay in contact with people in all sorts of ways. For you, maybe more than most, it's super invigorating for you to see how the people that you've touched have blossomed, have grown. It's a source of great power and energy and joy for you. And of course, if we're going to up level, we've got to take our sources of joy incredibly seriously. So that for us is just some thoughts and ideas about, for each one of these 9 strengths roles, about what you can do to step into your joy, step into your love, and put yourself out there in ways that make us go, whoa, she's at her very best. If you want more, we could come back and do more if any of you wanted this podcast thing. And there's also more specifics inside of that report of yours. So if you've put it aside over the last couple of months or whatever, pull it back out, turn to that how to take your performance to the next level section and really ruminate on it. Last point in this, Jamie, before we get to questions, if you don't do this, nobody will. No one could fix my stammer but me. No one knew about that situation for me. And it was only when I took really seriously that source of strength for me, that source of love, where I'm looking at all these people and whatever reason it's lifting me up, I've got to stop and breathe that in, because the world doesn't know me and the world doesn't owe me either. So the same will be true for you. You'll have different sources of energy and strength than me, but those sources of energy and strength are the things that you and you alone have got to take really, really, really seriously. With that said, Jamie, let's take any Q&A that you may have picked up here from everyone that's on the call.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Marcus, for the powerful presentation and for sharing your personal example of discovering your own strengths. You truly are a gifted speaker, and for challenging us to push ourselves to the next level. So we've had many questions come through our Q&A box, and so I'd like to move us now into answering questions from the group.
Yes.
Here we go. Okay, so our first question comes from Sunita. And Sunita's question is this: I am a firm believer of strengths thinking. However, a curious question, should one not work on areas of development in order to improve them? Or should one only find strategies to work around or compensate for them, as you said?
Well, everything about that, it's Sunita, right?
Correct.
So Sunita, everything's just about return on investment. So where are you going to get the biggest return on investment? If you've got something, and we should call it a weakness, by the way, we've talked about this on the first podcast, in the first Summer of Strength series webcast. A weakness isn't what you're bad at. A weakness is what weakens you. So let's call it that. If there are some things that weaken you, then we should name them weaknesses. And then you sort of have to decide whether or not they're getting in the way. Are they getting in the way? Are they getting in the way of a promotion? Are they getting in the way of you being effective at work? Are they getting in the way of you feeling good about yourself? In the case of my anxious friend, his anxiety, it makes him think badly of himself. Should I tell him to ignore that? No, I shouldn't. I should help him grapple with it because it's stopping him from being the best him. But there'll be some weaknesses maybe that you have that are just irrelevant. Just irrelevant. Just ignore them. There's an awful lot of stuff that weakens you. There's an awful lot of stuff that weakens me. And I just don't put myself in situations where I've got to face it. It's not cowardice. It's like, that's finding a way to mold your life to fit the energy that you need in your life. Again, no one really teaches us how to do that. And we're told that it's sort of noble to focus on our weaknesses, but it actually isn't. If something's holding you back, try to figure out how to mitigate it. How can you do that? Well, sometimes you just have work to get a little better. Okay. Sometimes you might want to learn a particular trick. Like for my anxious friend, is there a trick he can use technically to not be as anxious? Sometimes you might want to use a strength to mitigate that weakness. Above all, but please don't call weaknesses areas for development. Your strengths are areas for development. Your weaknesses are things to manage around so they don't get in the way of all this beautiful stuff about you. That doesn't mean you can't grow. It means you grow most here exponentially, and here you grow incrementally. At least that's what the brain science would suggest.
That's great. Thank you, Marcus. Our next question is from Cassie. And her question is, there are so many more opportunities available today than there were 50 years ago. How do I explain to my parents that work is more than a paycheck? Of course, we need to survive, but this is the 21st century and I want my work to matter to myself and the world. And if the work that fulfills me is opposite of what my parents want, how do I help them understand?
Oh, gosh, how long do we have? The simplest way, it depends what your parents are like, right? If they like data, you might share with them that people who say that they have a chance to use their strengths at work every day are far more productive, far more likely to stay with the company for at least a year, far less likely to have adverse actions like accidents on the job, and frankly, far more likely to get a higher performance rating from their manager. Like we got Dr. Mary Hayes on this call who has got all of those sorts of data at her fingertips. If you want Mary and you want to send something there that puts some specifics to that, there is data that show the most successful people, however you define success, but the most successful people are using their strengths a lot at work. That doesn't mean that they do what they love. There's actually very little data that says the most successful people love all that they do. Like that data isn't there. That sounds sort of rah-rah-y on a commencement address, but that's not there. But they do find love in what they do every day. That's different. They find love in what they do. So if you want your parents like data, use that data. If your parents like concepts, then tell them that the reason you're talking about you and what you get a kick out of and what feels authentic to you is not to be selfish, it's to be contributive. Love is the precursor to contribution. Love is the precursor to contribution. Love is for work. And the point of work, by the way, is to find out that which you love. That's one of the major points of work, is there's lots of different activities, as you said, like a lot of different choices. And the point of doing all of that is it's raw material for going, oh, I love that. And why is that important? Because it comes back around. It's like a beautiful loop where love is for work and work is for love, and love is for work and work is for love. And this isn't just to make you happy. It's like your boss would be happy, your parents would be happy, because if you have love in work, you're more productive, but you're more creative, you're more resilient, you feel more included in work. All sorts of good things happen when you feel like there's this connection between your loves and your work. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need 100% of it to fit what you love. There's going to be some stuff, and you could say this to your parents, there's some stuff I know I've just got to suck it up and do. Mm-hmm. But taking my love seriously is super important.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. All right, we have a few minutes left, so this will be our last question, Marcus, from Marika. How do I help someone lean into their strengths if they feel they can't financially afford to do what they love? For example, they need a salary and any job will do.
Yeah, that's the age-old question, isn't it? Any job will do. Oof. You just have to think about the bargain that you're extending to yourself when you say that. Jim Carrey the comedian Jim Carrey told this rather poignant story of his father, who was very, very funny. And probably Jim Carrey got a lot of his funny genes from his dad. I don't know how funny his mom was. Maybe she was funny too. But his dad was a really funny comedian who stood up and did some stand-up sometimes. But he didn't think he could make a living doing it. So he stayed an accountant for his entire life. And the irony, says Jim Carrey, is that they laid him off anyway. The company that he was an accountant for, they downsized and he was gone. So there's nothing safe in the world. I don't want to be irresponsible and tell your friend, hey, just ditch your job, and we've all got financial responsibilities. But if you keep putting off contributing what you love because it's not safe to do so financially, then who knows what train is going to come charging around the track around the corner and knock you off the rails. We just don't know. So in the spirit of we just don't know, betting on a world in which you can figure out a way to turn contribution into some sort of financial reward, that's not a bad bet. Bet on yourself. Now, look, we live in a world where everything's blurred. So your work does blur with your community, it does blur with your life, it blurs with your family, and you may get enough love from these other aspects of your life. It may be that you've just got one love cup and it's being filled with lots of different things. And maybe the work part of the filling there isn't a lot coming in from there. And you find ways to fill it with other things. Okay, that's not balance, by the way. You don't have 7 cups that you're juggling. You've got 1 cup and you're trying to fill it with things in your life that fill you up. And work is one of them. So if you make a calculus and you go, well, work isn't there, but I tell you what, I got this hobby, I got this relationship, I've got this community involvement, and now work happens to be the place where I am least myself. That might work for you. It might work for your friend. But it does sound, even as I'm saying it, it sounds like a weird bargain, because the thing that you're actually sort of doing most of the time is the thing that you're least yourself at. So if that perpetuates for years, then you end up living a second-rate version of somebody else's life. And that can't be healthy, psychologically speaking. So, people wonder about taking work home and, taking home to work. And unfortunately, you are a unified being. So if you got a situation at work that is super depleting for you, the people who love you the most at home will feel it. I mean, they will sense it. So it's probably a timing issue rather than is an absolute issue. There might be a good time to bet on yourself. And I wouldn't know what that time is. That would depend on the circumstances of your friend. But as a long-term strategy, betting on yourself and who you are and what you love is probably a bloody good thing to do.
I like that encouragement to bet on ourselves today. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. And so this concludes our Summer of Strength series. The learning does not stop here. I invite you to continue on your strengths journey at the Gift of Standout page at marcusbuckingham.com and by following Marcus on Instagram. We've been blown away by the attendance and the enthusiasm around this series, and so we hope to do more events like this in the future. Be sure to subscribe to Marcus's email list to be the first to hear about them. Well, thank you, Marcus, for taking the time to share your insights with us. And thank you all.
Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope that you have enjoyed this series and that you go forth, taking what you've learned and making the most of your strengths every day. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Take care. Thanks, everyone. Jamie, million thanks, huh?
Yeah, thank you. Nice job, Marcus. Great presentation today.
Cheers. Bye.